All right, what's going on, everyone? So the ceasefire between Iran and the United States is probably not going to last all that much longer. I mean, in fairness, it never really began. I mean, the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah that is or wasn't or back is a part of this ceasefire has been continuous. And everything we're getting, not just the words, which both sides certainly are posturing right now in the negotiation phase, but the actions of Iran, Israel, and the United States all point towards a continuation of hostilities here in the coming days. So starting out with a couple statements here from Iran, and we should note that right now the two parties are supposed to be moving forward with meeting in Pakistan. The U.S. delegation has departed, are in air right now, heading overseas to do this, led by Vice President J.D. Vance. The Iranian delegation, from everything we can see, has not yet departed Iran. Now, shorter flight for them, but still, as of this recording, they are holding firm that certain conditions have not been met. Therefore, they are not even going to sit down with the United States to begin conversations. Their Speaker of Parliament, Halibaf, earlier today put out a statement saying, quote, "Two of the measures mutually agreed upon between the parties have yet to be implemented: a ceasefire in Lebanon and the release of Iran's blocked assets prior to the commencement of negotiations. These two matters must be fulfilled before negotiations begin." We have no idea what the terms were to sit down and actually talk, because we don't even know what the blueprint is at this point. Remember, Iran put out a couple weeks ago, put out their 10-point proposal to end the war. It's essentially an Iranian wish list. The U.S. had or an IRGC wish list. The U.S. had their 15-point proposal that is everything that we would like to see as an outcome of this conflict. In President Trump's announcement a few nights ago, he said the 10-point plan is a basis for negotiations. That's a good starting point. A lot of pushback on the administration because it doesn't address things like the missile program, the proxies, or the nuclear program, like the reasons that we went into this war in the first place. So then we had the administration saying, no, not that 10-point. There's a different 10-point list. You don't know about it. It's private. We threw that one away. So there's a different list, apparently, that we're working off of here. And we haven't heard anything about what the preconditions are to sit down and talks. Iran is now saying that the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel has not been withheld. And they're right. Everything I can tell is that from the public statements that we have seen that our own administration has cited is that Hezbollah and Israel were included in this ceasefire. And it seems like we finally got there after some conversation, and the attacks there are still happening. Like, as of today, this morning, just a few hours ago, we 100% have seen Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and we 100% have seen Hezbollah attacks in Israel. I don't know who started that today, this most recent round. I don't think it really matters, unfortunately, because Iran is looking at the fact that there is still fighting going on at all, and saying because of that, nope, not going to sit down and talk. So that has to stop at some point, or these talks aren't going to go anywhere. So you can already see we're very much on the edge of these just not even beginning. All right, so ceasefire falls apart if the two sides never even sit down to talk. The second part here, coming from the Speaker of Iranian's parliament, is the releasing of Iran's blocked assets. And this is the first time we've really heard this mentioned publicly, again, with the recognition that whatever the preconditions were, that's not public. We joked yesterday, there was a lot of an assessment going around where people were saying it sounds like they didn't actually write down what they agreed to. And it sounds ridiculous, right? But I'm pretty sure at this point we can verify that's what happened. Like, this was just a handshake agreement, and a lot of details kind of slipped through at best. Now, Gregory Brew, a senior analyst over at the Eurasia Group, talked about these frozen assets. He said there is $6 billion in Iranian assets frozen in Qatar and about $4 billion frozen elsewhere. This is the first time that Iranian officials have raised it ahead of talks. Crucially, they did so publicly after Vance had already departed for Islamabad. Getting that money probably isn't necessary for talks to happen, but it's very likely the Iranian price for concessions elsewhere. $10 billion is a good chunk of change. And right now, Iran is essentially saying that is the price for us to sit down and talk with the United States. Interpret that however you will. My interpretation, based off of the information we have, is that it is unlikely this continues much further. This ceasefire continues much further. Now, whether that was a precondition that the United States is balking at, that points to the ceasefire going away, or if it's Iran trying to exert more or exact more concessions from the United States now that Vance is in air. You could see that being a situation as well. That also does not lend a lot of confidence to these talks really going anywhere. To that end, the new leader of Iran, which we have an Israeli assessment we'll get into here in a second, where they actually said, hey, this new group, more radical than the last group, which kind of a step in the wrong direction. But Mojtaba Khamenei, just yesterday, said, quote, "We will not let the criminal aggressors go free. We will demand compensation for each and every injury inflicted, blood money for the martyrs, and reparations for the disabled veterans of this war. And we will advance the management of the Strait of Hormuz to a new stage." Again, a lot of posturing, and we're seeing this from President Trump too, who today went on a flurry of posts talking about how Iran is really bad at war and they don't have any cards to play, and the only reason that they're still alive, that we allowed them to be alive, is to negotiate. So you're definitely getting, I mean, in the whole thing, there was an argument that the White House was putting forward in recent days that the only reason Iran came to the table at all was the posturing by President Trump saying that he was going to wipe out the entire Iranian civilization. So there's a lot of posturing that we have to kind of pick through here. The key component there is Khamenei said the management of the Strait of Hormuz is moving to a new stage. I don't know what the new stage is. The current stage, not good. Remember, that was one of the publicly stated preconditions by President Trump. President Trump, in his post, said, as long as Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz and allows free travel through the strait, then we will stop bombing them. But the strait wasn't open when he said that. It wasn't open a day after he said that. It's still not open today. In fact, just this morning, White House advisor Kevin Hassett to the media said, quote, "The strait could open in 2 months." Are you kidding me? What? Where's this coming from, right? That was a precondition for talks. And all of a sudden you wake up here on April 10th and it's like, nah, or 2 months. We'll get there. We might get to the point of opening that up eventually. So yeah, on the ground, that situation hasn't changed one bit. Now, we do have more from the U.S. and Israeli side talking about how the new leadership might be more extreme than the last. But first, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Proton Mail. So back when we first got on the internet, it felt pretty low stakes. I mean, you made an account, chose a username that you may or may not regret today, and that was about it. Nobody was really thinking about being tracked on the internet, which of course is a very different scenario today, which is why I partnered with the sponsor of today's video, Proton Mail. Because now every app download, every login, every just quickly enter your email address right here, it all adds up to a profile that you never really signed up for. And look, to be fair, we weren't exactly careful when we were kids, right? I mean, we were out here making these email addresses, hitting agree without reading a single word and just up and good to go. And fast forward to today, and those inboxes are chaos. It's full of spam, ads, and who knows how much of your data is being passed around behind the scenes. That might have been normal for us, but it doesn't have to be that way for our kids. With Proton Mail, you can lock in your child's email address right now for just $1. No ads, no tracking, no profiling, just a private account from the start. It's basically a reset, a clean online identity that they actually have control over. So if you want to make privacy the default for your children, you can set up your child's Proton Mail account now, or grab a free one for yourself by using my link in the description and pinned comment below, proton.me/Preston Stewart. And thank you so much to Proton Mail for sponsoring today's video. All right, so we've got the Iranian posturing. Of course, you have to expect that, but also the Iranian actions of still locking down the Strait of Hormuz, putting out a map saying ships can only travel in a certain area. And by the way, you have to coordinate with the IRGC Navy or you risk destruction. So Iran's actions right now, in some ways, not all, but in some ways show that they're just ready for this thing to return to hostilities. They know what they have in terms of strategic leverage in the Strait of Hormuz. We've all seen it at this point. I'm a little bit concerned that the international reaction has been relatively muted. So Iran is thinking that they've really kind of stumbled into a gold mine here. Iranian revenue, state revenue, could jump exponentially if they all of a sudden are able to charge a toll for every ship that passes through, which is what they have proposed right now. Not good for the short or long term. Now, to Iran's credit, if we want to do that, they have not, from what I've seen, fired missiles or drones into any American bases or any Gulf Coast countries in the last 24 hours. It sounds like that might have stopped. I might have missed a wave in there, but at the very least, it's down. So that is a signal towards maybe a ceasefire actually happening. Now, the New York Post had an interview with President Trump earlier this morning as Vice President Vance is heading overseas to start these negotiations, and they asked the president if he thought the talks would be successful. And he essentially told him, like, the thing you're not supposed to tell the press during a ceasefire. He said, quote, We're going to find out in about 24 hours. We're going to know soon. We have a reset going. We're loading up the ships with the best ammunition, the best weapons ever made, even better than what we did previously, and we blew them apart. So one of the arguments always against a ceasefire is it allows your adversary time to breathe. So the argument that could be made in this exact scenario is Iran could look at this setup and say, we don't want to allow the United States to restock their missiles, to move more assets into theater, to move more soldiers into the Middle East, move more aircraft in the Middle East, whatever it is. We want to keep the United States at this rapid tempo because things break down. We run out of certain types of munitions, or it's harder to refill everything. It takes time. Like, it's a significant effort to keep those sorties at the same rate that we were running for the last 40 days. Same thing in the other direction. An argument against a ceasefire from a U.S. perspective is, hey, Iran might be on the ropes. The IRGC might be on the ropes. They're not communicating. Their launches have, they've stayed depressed, right? They dropped by about 90% in the first couple of days. They've stayed down there, but there's still U.S. and Israeli aircraft out there hunting these mobile missile launchers day in and day out. When you let off that pressure, it allows them time to, I don't know, maybe start to rebuild some of their defense infrastructure. Now, not like rebuild missiles, right? But maybe dig some out, or maybe relocate some of their assets across the country. In fact, that's kind of what Israel is getting at in a new assessment released on Israeli I-24 News just a few moments ago, where they said IDF officials told a closed Knesset briefing that Iran's new leadership is more extreme than its predecessor amid ongoing regional tensions and uncertainty over the durability of the ceasefire. They say, according to the officials, Israel achieved very impressive military achievements in the operation, including strikes on missile systems and launch infrastructure. However, they warned that Iran is already working to rebuild its capabilities, stating that despite the damage inflicted, efforts to restore missile production are currently underway. And one thing I want to stress here is, yes, we have satellite imagery. We can get very, very, very current analysis of things that are happening around Iran. In fact, that's one of the arguments that President Trump has made against putting boots on the ground around the nuclear facilities. As he said, we have 24/7. We're watching those things all the time. We cannot watch the entire country 24/7 without aircraft overhead. And according to the ceasefire, we do not have aircraft overhead. In fact, one of the violations mentioned yesterday by Iran was an Israeli drone was shot down over the western portion of the country. My read on that is for Iran at this point to be saying that the ceasefire is moving along and is still acceptable, maybe, is that the U.S. and Israel are not flying recon flights over Iran 24/7. So we have some gaps in some way, shape, or form in watching the battlefield. And according to Israel, the ceasefire is being utilized by Iran right now to relocate assets, maybe dig out some missiles, move some launchers, reallocate air defense to different parts of the country. So what we maybe thought was a clear route a week ago might not be clear anymore. If you move an air defense radar or a launch system, or maybe front load man pads, the man portable air defense systems, from a location in, say, eastern or southern Iran to maybe further west or in and around Tehran, it changes the threat picture. So as expected in any sort of ceasefire, I mean, President Trump right out said it, right? We're resetting. We're reloading for when we need to go back to it. Iran is too. And while that is the prudent measure for any country to take based off of the other actions that we're seeing and lack of actions in some regard, it looks an awful lot like this war is likely to restart here in the coming days. Probably won't last. This ceasefire as it sits today probably won't last more than another 5 days at most. But we'll see. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.